Hello, welcome back to Boiler Room Reviews. My name is Ian, and it's a rather gloomy day here in England, so I thought I'd take the opportunity to do another review. Today I'm going back to Yukio Mishima, and I'm going to be talking about his 1950 novel, Thirst for Love. This was his third novel, his second major novel, so it followed Confessions of a Mask, which I've reviewed previously on the channel, which is one of his most revered novels. This novel is usually seen as one of his decent ones, but not necessarily up there with his most seminal works. I've read most of what's been translated into English by Mishima, with the exception of the Sea of Fertility tetralogy. That's a mouthful to try and say that one, which I'm saving to read one after the other, and I'll most likely review those. So I'm saving them for when I'm really in the mood to do all four of them in one go. But Thirst for Love, so yes, 1950 this came out. It's set in post-war Japan, and it's a little bit of a departure because as much as it's written in the third person, it's from the female perspective. And once again, I'll have to apologise in advance for my awful pronunciation of any of the Japanese names, but there we go. I was born in England, grew up in Essex, which isn't the classiest of places in the world. But anyway, so we follow the character Etsuko, and she's a widow. Her husband has died, and she's moved in with her in-laws, who sort of all live under the same roof, generations of families there. And the story itself, I think, only goes over about 2 months, I think, something like that. So Etsuko, her husband died previously. I think her husband was called Ryosuke. So in a sense, we start to think maybe she's mourning or grieving, but that kind of gets dispelled when she's reflecting on the past and his many affairs. So she's not necessarily grieving about her husband dying. And she ends up in a kind of relationship with her father-in-law, Yukishi. Now, it's not really expressed as to whether there's any coercion there, but she ends up in bed with Yukishi on more than one occasion. So they're in a kind of relationship. So he's seemingly using her as a replacement for his wife, and perhaps she's engaging in this relationship just to ensure that she can remain in the family household. But it's certainly not expressed explicitly as to whether there's any actual verbalised coercion from Yukishi. And at times it's almost as if she's punishing herself in some way in this relationship. And there's some really quite dark passages, descriptive passages of their physical relationship. I think one of the lines is that when she's in bed with the father-in-law, it's like being caressed by a skeleton, something like that. Yeah, so it's quite grotesque. One of the other main characters is Saburo, who's a gardener, who's very youthful, shows sort of strength and beauty in his physique. So it's very Mishima in that sense, the sort of strength and beauty. And it's hard to say whether Etsuko starts to fall in love with him or whether it's just a lust of seeing this strength and beauty. But either way, this sort of develops a little. She buys him a gift. She's watching him from afar. This develops in a way that I don't really want to express any further because it leads up to the climax of the novel, which I don't want to put those spoilers in there because it's really worth reading this to the end. I found the ending of this novel really quite shocking, not just in its violence, but in its trying to understand the motivations of the people involved in the violence was really, really interesting to me. Really classic Mishima characters. None of these characters are particularly likable, but they're explained very, very well. And when I say they're explained very well, there's also a lot of ambiguity about their behaviours, which makes them very human to me. If we look back on our lives and why did I do that? Why did I do this? And you don't even often understand why you behave in certain ways yourself. And the ending of this novel really expresses that to me. But yeah, on the whole, this is one of my favourite Mishima novels. The prose is concise. It's not a particularly long novel. You can get through it quickly. The characters are really interesting, and it's got a rather bitter and twisted ending that I really enjoyed. So I'd give this a solid 7 out of 10. Probably in my top 3 or 4 of what I've read by Mishima. But let me know your thoughts in the comments. What did you think of this novel? Would you rank it as one of his best, or do you think it's a little bit mid? What did you think of the climax in this novel? Did you understand the motivation of the characters in it? I did to some degree, but other bits were left open. But anyway, I shall leave you for now and get back to my gloomy day in England. I hope you're all well. Please like and subscribe, and I shall see you next time.